You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It's season 2. It's episode 87. And today was Craig Counsell introductory press conference day. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on the socials, Fly the W670 on Twitter, Instagram, Fly the W on Facebook. Of course, you can email us at flythew670@gmail.com. Crawly, happy Craig Counsell Day officially. I'll go first really quick. I know I was wet blanket, not loving Craig Counsell, and I thought Craig Counsell had a really good day today over at the Cubs offices. I thought he did a really nice job, and part of it is he has a daughter named Finley, and I have a daughter named Finley. So we have common ground now. I thought Craig won the press conference today.
Was that Finley's jersey you had last time, the David Ross jersey?
David Ross, you wore it. Both my daughters wore that jersey. Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe we got to maybe we got to get her a Counsell jersey.
No, maybe.
Here's the thing for me is that I wasn't big on the David Ross hiring when Madden got fired. I didn't like the Madden firing. I didn't like the Ross hiring. So this kind of brings me back to Joe Madden and kind of the excitement I felt when Joe Madden got hired. I would say the difference is Joe Madden is 100% Hollywood. He was born for press conferences, where I think, it's interesting when I was watching, and I went through this press conference a couple times, with Craig Counsell, just he's very methodical. He takes his time when he's thinking, and you can just kind of see that he's kind of always it's always going in the head. And it may not be as entertaining as Joe Madden was, but I think that there was a lot to take away from the news conference.
Yeah, I thought there was a lot of really good points, and just a couple of them. I know we're going to go over some clips, just a couple of them that stood out to me that I want to share with you and get your reaction. It feels close. It's my job to be part of taking us to the next level, and that is the plan. There is momentum happening here. Those are some of the key takeaways that I wrote down, Crawly.
Absolutely. And he does have his homework to do, but here's some things that people know about around baseball. Number one, the Cubs have a lot of payroll flexibility. Okay. Especially with the opt-out by Marcus Stroman. They're going to have to fill that hole somehow, but they do have a lot of payroll flexibility. They have a good core that we've talked about with Nico and Seiya and Ian. Guys like
Dansby, of course,
Dansby, right? Swanson, all you have a core there, and everyone in baseball knows that most places have the Cubs ranked between 2 and 6 when you talk about farm systems. So they have a lot going for them. So it's not like a job that he's taking where it's like, oh God, where are we starting from? Where to begin? There's a lot that you have to work with. You have a lot of trade chips. You have a lot of players ready to bubble up right through the minor league system. So I think it is an exciting time. And you're talking about a guy with Craig Counsell who always had players taken away from him. Every time it seemed like, I think the thing that really bothered him was when they were in that pennant chase and they traded Josh Hader, traded the closer of the team when they're trying to make a run for it. What does that tell you about management's commitment to winning?
Yeah, great point. Great point. Crawly, I know we've got some clips that you want to share with our listeners, some of the stuff that they may not have seen, but some stuff that we've decided that we want to share with the audience that we want to give our opinions on.
And so, as they do, they come out and Counsell's wearing a suit and everybody's looking nice, and they do the little show where he gets to put on the jersey. And I got to tell you, Dustin, he looked mighty good in Cubby blue. He looked annoying in that Brewers colors, but something about putting on a Cubs jersey, I think, just makes you naturally more handsome.
Well, and he also said it's time to be a Cub. He made that comment. I almost feel like that's going to be like the sales pitch that he and Jed are going to have. Like, now is the time. Now is the time to come to Wrigley Field and be part of Cubs.
And I truly think that he does have that Midwesterner in him. And sometimes you have to know, I don't think he would have been successful in New York. I think the way that the New York media is, and the stories they put on the back pages of the sports and everything, Craig Tober is Floptober or something where they just like big size 48 font. Like it's just like, I think this is just more, we know the beat writers, we've talked to him. It's just a different vibe than in New York. And I think that really made a difference with him. And so the fact that he's able to come to a place willing to spend, that has resources and keeps those Midwestern roots, I think that was just a total no doubter for him.
Right. And that's the one thing that's a little bit questionable, is he was able to do this in a smaller market with a smaller payroll. So then the obvious is, oh, well, if he has many more tools, then he should be even more successful. Maybe not always the case. Maybe a little easier to operate in that smaller bubble. So we'll see how much the bright lights in the big city and Craig Counsell go together. I hope it's a mesh. I hope it's a match made in heaven, but we're going to have to see. That is something that has to be under consideration.
I think it's a guy that if you want to talk about, the weakest aspect of a manager, I think it really probably is media and press conferences. I have absolutely no fear in his baseball decision-making, his roster decision-making. I have none of that. And so I think that this is going to be, he's been a major league player for many, many years, a successful major leaguer. I don't think the bright lights are going to bother him too much. And I don't think he's going to be, I think it's going to be an adjustment when he first goes to CubsCon and people are trying to get selfies and it gets to that craziness. But I think once the swing of the season gets around, I think he's going to be just fine.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's get to a clip, Crawly.
Right. So like we said, we got, he comes in, he puts on the suit, the Cubs jersey on here. And so right now, let's see what he has to say here. Here's how he comes in and he gives a little speech.
You walk into, Wrigley today, the first day as a Cub, and it already starts to mean something. You walk into the history, you walk into the energy, you walk into a place that, like, you already know it demands your best. And that feeling is just a feeling that I need to have, and I love to have, and I love that to be a part of, like, my daily life. And so that feeling exists right now is really, really special for me, and makes me so excited. It really does. It's been an emotional week, like, no bones about it. Much harder than I imagined. Just the speed at which this happened, and 17 years of relationships, that hits you hard. Truthfully, that hits you really hard. The Brewers have meant a lot to me. I have great relationships there. The relationships I have there are the relationships that I am going to try with all of me to build in Chicago. They're what's important about this game. The connection to the people.
Really, Dustin, a couple things there that stood out to me is when he talked about the energy. And this is a guy that for as many years as he has been with Milwaukee, think about Wrigley North and being in your home ballpark and hearing the fans take over. To me, he understands the energy and the vibe that kind of come with being a Cub.
Absolutely. And the big time that is Wrigley Field and what it means, to the game of baseball, to the city of Chicago, specifically the north side of Chicago, and the impact, and that this is a big time gig, and you need to be ready to meet that big time gig and have big time expectations.
And the other thing, though, that he talked about is the speed at which this happened.
Oh,
he
boy.
had no clue that he was even possibly going to be a Chicago Cub on November 1st.
Nope.
And now here we are 2 weeks later, and he is going to be, you know what I mean? Like, remember when Wilson Contreras was talking about the Cardinals and he imagined himself, he never, this was not even in his realm that this could be a possibility. So I think it is probably overwhelming. And for someone like Craig, something that it's going to get better with time, but it is still probably very shocking to him. Not something I think he had at all on his radar.
Yeah, it's I just can't say enough, Crawly. I was just blown away by this guy today. He really got it. There was only one or two little things that but otherwise, boy, he really hit it out of the park, I thought.
Yeah.
Is what makes this thing go. It's the connection to the staff. It's the connection to the players. It's the connection to the fans. And that is the challenge I have ahead of me. It's a big one. It takes time, but it's the one that I have to get right. I'm sitting up here, I'm a little scared. I'm sitting up here, you're a little uncomfortable. But that's how you get to a better place. And that's how you push yourself as a person to a better place, I think. And that's how you create new relationships that are just more impactful. And through this process, that has already happened. And that's another thing that just tells you this is right, man. This is the right thing going on here, and this is something that's really special.
I like the fact of making yourself uncomfortable. You could just sit, he could have sat in Milwaukee for the rest of his career, but he took a risk. And that to me says something, Dustin.
He was looking for a new challenge. He needed something new. He needed to get those juices going again, if you will. So yeah, absolutely. I love that about him.
That's been a big part of this for me. From a baseball standpoint, I think I saw quickly that like the organization is just in great health, and like that, Jed presented a very compelling vision of that. It is time to be a Cub, right? There is momentum happening here, and it feels close. And that means there's a really exciting future ahead of us. And now it's my job to be part of taking us to the next level. And that's the plan.
I mean, right there, Crawly. I mean, the last 20 seconds, if that doesn't get you just so pumped as a Cub fan, then nothing will. Check your pulse.
I think that David Ross, was learning on the job. But for the here and the now, what he's talking about is taking you to that next level. Same as Ricky Renteria when we talk about Joe Madden. I don't think Ricky Renteria could have done the job Joe Madden did in 2015, 2016. I don't think David Ross could do the job that Craig Counsell will be able to do in 2024 and for the next few years. I'm really excited about this.
I don't know if I have the answer. That I don't know if I'm good enough to like get that right all the time. I think the biggest thing people have to do is we have to figure out, like, you got to have the courage to be yourself. And I think identifying that in people is probably the first thing. There's a selflessness to winning. That's important. There's, can you see the bigger picture? And then, the bond that in sports that teammates create is the most powerful things that sports has going. And that's a bad word, but making sure that you understand how important that word is, teammate, I think goes a long way to producing winners.
That was in response to Bruce Levine's question. We're going to have Bruce on in the next segment, but that was Bruce asking about what's made him a winner. And I thought of you, Dustin, when he said selflessness. Whatever's best for the team. You know what I mean?
Well, you're looking for those types of players, and those types of players have probably excelled, and those are the types of players that bought into Craig Counsell's message there. The question becomes, when you're potentially going after Shohei Ohtani, when you might trade for Juan Soto, if Cody Bellinger has a $250 million contract, does that change the player? Is that player still a good clubhouse guy? Is that player still a good teammate? Is that player still doing all the little things they need to do to help your team win? Or are they satisfied with kind of generational wealth?
Now, one of the things that he was asked was, what stood out to you about the 2023 Cubs? So this is from a different manager's perspective, I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, the 2023 Cubs team, had a good season. There's a core to that team. It's 83 wins. And that means that there's things that are close, right? What you have to be careful about is that last year does not indicate this year. And I think teams are different. I've used this analogy for a long time, but there's a soup made, and it can be the same players, but it's going to taste a little different next year when grandma makes it, you know what I mean? And so it's always a little different, and you have to create a new dynamic every single year, no matter what's going on. And so there'll be players that have had wonderful years last year that are not so much, and vice versa. But there's a solid core and a solid foundation, and that, speaks to the health, I think, of the organization, and that speaks to a bright future.
Grandma's soup. There's an obvious shirt for you.
Yeah, I love that analogy because I laughed and, you get emotional about it, but it's been several years now. My grandmother has not been around, and, Christmas, Thanksgiving, always by them. And she would have her highball and her apron on and always smoking a cigarette. And like the couple years after she was no longer there, I used to say that the gravy for the potatoes or the turkey just wasn't the same. Something was missing, and it might gross people out, but it was like almost like, like that she had like accidentally ashed in the gravy while she was stirring it, sipping her highball, and that wasn't there. So that's what I think of when I hear that analogy.
When I saw it, it's, even when you think about the 2017 Cubs, there's going to be differences. It's not the same team as the 2016 Cubs. It's the 2017 Cubs. And so maybe a guy that had a good year regresses a little bit. Maybe there's a guy that's going to outperform what he did last year. You don't know. But whatever it is, you got to make those ingredients work. And that's really what job is, what Craig's job is going to be. The question is, Jed has talked about, he really didn't know Craig Counsell much other than him being obviously an opposing manager. But, what did Jed sell Craig on with the Cubs?
So truthfully, Jed's vision was really just of kind of, to me, the health of what we look like going forward. And this process was fast. I don't know that I've joked with Carter already that I don't know much about the Cubs. But I believed in how Jed sold the vision. Absolutely. And that was impactful to me. And, I know enough about city, the franchise, the history, just baseball in general, that I know how it works, and so the vision that he presented of kind of excitement and where the franchise is at kind of in on a big picture level, we've still got to get a lot of decisions right. You got to get a lot right still, but it's a really healthy place to start. Yeah.
You got to make the right decision. So, Craig knows what he's talking about. And remember, he was a front office guy before he was a manager.
Right.
So,
they're going to have a really interesting dynamic. Craig, Jed, and Carter. That's going to be a really interesting meeting room, group text, and the follow-up, what I would have loved is, okay, you mentioned that there are questions that we have to get right. Can you get a little bit more specific? What is the biggest question about this Cubs roster right now, right? I'd love to know his opinion of where the gaping hole is, if you will.
Right. And that, like I said, I think he's just going to be a valuable guy. Nobody's trying to diminish what Rossi does. I just think this is a generational managerial talent. And so I think that he just can do so much, and he talks a little bit about that. The next question was about the reaction to the Cubs being interested in him and what the first conversations were like.
The Cubs had a manager, and that, really makes you not think about him. The process, my process dragged on slowly, really. And then, Jed phoned me on November 1st, and we agreed to meet. And it was it was really Jed's vision here that sold me. It was a feeling. The meeting was, we were just feeling each other out, to be honest with you. I've never really met Jed, didn't know a ton about him, just kind of that he's the Cubs, runs the Cubs. So it was a little bit of like feeling each other out as much as anything, I guess, probably is the best way to say it. You're not really laying everything on the table in a conversation like that. You're feeling each other out. but at some point, it was a long conversation, and honestly, Jed was aggressive in that conversation. Yeah.
Let me just say something, is that I heard plenty of people always talk about Jed as, oh, he's Theo's coffee boy. He's the one that gets Theo coffee. You know what I mean? Because you'd go into these press conferences and it would be Theo who would be the one to speak, and Jed would be the one holding the jersey to put on, and that would be his job.
Right. They were calling him like the potted plant.
This is Jed planting his flag. And I think that if this is as successful as we hope it is, this is going to be the moment that Jed doesn't just become Theo's Robin to Theo's Batman.
If this all works out, Crawly, and I'm serious, he might get the statue before Theo.
It'd be interesting
because he was part of that, and then Theo took off, didn't want to deal with it, and Jed is steering this in the right direction at the very least.
Absolutely. And so, someone asked him again, what makes him a winning manager? This is about him as a manager. This is what he had to say.
Yeah. Again, I won't tell you I completely know the answer to that question. But my responsibility, I always think, is a couple things. I have to be prepared. That's first. I have to have the courage to be myself. Because when you put yourself out here in these situations, like, you mess up, you have flaws, you're not going to be perfect. That's okay. And then I have to connect with people, and because that brings out the best in them. And I think that's specifically players, to put them in a position to succeed and put them in the best place to succeed, mentally and as teammates. So those are the three things that I, ask of myself, and try to do. And then there's some let the chips where they fall, that you have to be okay with. So I would say those are the three things.
The thing that if you listen to the last Fly the W podcast, I had Tim Dillard on, who was a teammate of Counsell's and does the pre and post game shows for Valley, Wisconsin. The first thing that he said when I said, well, what do Cub fans have to be excited about when it comes to Craig Counsell? And he said, no one will be more prepared than Craig Counsell.
Yep.
And I feel
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that at all.
I feel that there is no situation that he is not prepared for on that diamond. And I think that when we talked about David Ross, I think he created a great culture. I think he created a culture of accountability. I think he did a lot. Like, my issue sometimes was with some of the game decisions, and they're not always going to be right. He's going to be wrong sometimes. It's what Joe Madden called outcome bias. But it just because the outcome didn't turn out the way you wanted it to didn't mean it wasn't the right decision. It just, you may have put a pitcher in the right, and the pitch wasn't executed. So all of these are things that you kind of look at. The next question talks about the timeline of events that have happened. Let me get that going.
Yeah. Jed, I didn't pick up his call. I wasn't. Yeah, that's what first happened, I guess. I called him back, and he indicated that the Cubs had interest. We kind of discussed some generalities of what was going on, just like my schedule and things like that. And I suggested that because I was interested, but cautious, I guess, is probably the best way to say it. But I was interested, and so I suggested we get together that day because I had scheduled. I was going to New York the next day, and the time my process was getting pretty fast. So then we got together later that day. Yeah, it's different for sure. So 162 games.
Dustin, really quick. I mean, he was literally going to New York the next day.
Speed dating, Crawly. Speed dating for Craig Counsell.
I messaged our friend Tony Andracki after this press conference because I listened to Mully and Haw every morning religiously in the Pick Six, and you were asking about the question you wanted to ask about postseason baseball.
Yep.
And so Tony asked it in a way that I thought was very diplomatic.
Yep.
And this was Craig's response.
The closest one
is
to
a
it.
marathon, and our game, I think, is rewarded, and decisions you make are rewarded kind of over the marathon, and players, frankly, are rewarded over the marathon. In short playoff series, we have luck in our game, and we have just fortune in our game, and we have you don't control everything in really short stints in this. You control less in really short stints in this game. So it causes, or it forces, aggressiveness on managers, I think. And I think the best thing that you just have, the mindset you have to take into playoffs is one of aggressiveness. And you still have to trust your players, and you still have to go with you have to be willing to trust your players and trust your great players, but with an aggressive mindset. Really.
When after the Cubs won the World Series in 2016, Theo Epstein was named the most influential person in the world over the Pope. And Theo was asked about this. And Theo said, I don't know how influential I am. I can't even get the dog to listen to me. And what Theo said is that, again, if Ben Zobrist, if that ball was a couple inches closer to the third baseman, and let's say the Cubs lose that, is he now not the most influential person in the world? That's baseball. And in playoff baseball, inches. Things can happen that just over 162 games, you say, oh, well, sometimes you're going to get the call, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're going to get the bounce, sometimes you won't. So it's all going to even out over 162. That doesn't happen over 3 games or 5 games or 7 games. Everything is magnified times 1,000. And as I've always said with this criticism about Craig, they're really, I've never sat there and been like, oh my God, that mistake just cost them the postseason. Nothing. It just ended up not being their time. There was a rookie outfielder. I remember he just missed a ball under his glove. I mean, the kid played fine, and then he just made one bad play. And that one bad, again, Seiya Suzuki played, how many great catches did Seiya Suzuki have over 162 in 2024? We remember that one that he stole against the White Sox. But you know what everyone's going to remember? The one that he dropped.
Right. And if it wasn't for that, I mean, we might be having a completely different conversation. I mean, season 2, episode 87 might have been which Japanese relief pitcher will look best in Cubby Blue instead of Craig Counsell as the manager. Right. And you talk about one instant, one bit of luck, one fluke thing can change everything. It can change the course of everything. But he does have to own, Crawly. He has to own that he's 7-12 in the postseason. He has to own that he's never won a National League pennant. He has to own that there is no such thing as Craig Tober. There may be Craig Timber, but there's no such thing as Craig Tober yet. And he's here to change that, not only for himself, but for the Cubs moving forward.
Now, he was asked a little bit about talking to the players, and he said he hasn't really done that so far.
He kind of pointed a thumb, like he almost like I've done it a little, but not quite enough yet.
Right. And I think he is trying to get a feel for everything because this happened so quickly. And, he talked a lot about David Ross and the comments about David Ross and just the type of person David Ross is. And this is why I hate that David Ross was a manager, just because when it comes to the firing, it's like, I want people to understand how much I appreciate David Ross, the player, and how much I appreciate David Ross, the person. And to a degree, David Ross, the manager, was fine for where the Cubs were when they had him. It kills me that he had to get fired. But at the same time, I think that this is the right move. And I think, to me, this press conference, solidified my belief that this was going to be something that all Cub fans are going to, like yourself, are going to be excited about.
Crawly, it's been a great time going over what Craig Counsell said. I really look forward to seeing more, hearing more from Craig. And of course, now the next step is free agency. Who are the Cubs going to buy? Who are the Cubs going to trade? We're about to have a great conversation with Bruce Levine, but we want to remind you to listen, download, review, and most importantly, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on the socials. Fly the W670 Twitter, Instagram. Of course, it's on Facebook. And email Crawly and I at flythew670@gmail.com. You are listening to the Fly the W670 podcast. It's season 2. It's episode 87. Craig Counsell, introductory press conference day. And in this segment, we are talking to MLB insider for the Marquee Sports Network and, of course, The Score. And, when you hear about Cubs baseball, my opinion first, I'll let Crawly weigh in on this in a second. And I've been a Cubs fan for, 40 some odd years. And I always want to know what our guest, Bruce Levine, thinks when a Cubs happening happens. So, Bruce, welcome to the Fly the W podcast. Happy Craig Counsell officially introduced day. Right off the bat, you have been around for, I don't know, they said today this is the 56th manager. Have you been around for at least 20 of these, do you think? How many different managers?
I think I missed Frank Chance, and I believe when Hornsby was named manager, I missed that too. But other than that, I've seen everyone since 1980.
Okay.
So we saw 2 managers in 1980. There was Preston Gomez and Joey Malfitano. So, I've seen them all, and it's always interesting. I was impressed by the humbleness and the straightforward approach by Craig Counsell, that he really hasn't accomplished anything as a Cub manager, that he's as excited about this as anything he's done in a long time, and that he has a lot of work to do to catch up on what the strengths of the organization are, who the people are, even calling players and saying hello. To me, it was extremely refreshing. And the one big takeaway I had, which I knew a couple of days ago, and I sent it out on whatever they call it, X or Twitter these days, the fact that he and Ross had a 45-minute conversation the day that he was hired, which shows you an awful lot about the class of David Ross texting him and immediately Counsell calling him and having a long conversation. That should tell you an awful lot about the class of both of these guys.
Real quick, Bruce, before we go any farther, you just talked about the David Ross reaching out to Craig Counsell. We're just hearing about it. You've probably already heard about it, but we're just hearing about it, that according to reports, David Ross has turned down the opportunity to be the bench coach of the Yankees. Your reaction to that?
It's a smart move. I mean, you don't go from being a manager of one of the most high-profile teams in baseball to a week later accepting a coaching job. I mean, that's not David Ross. That's not anybody who wants to continue to have a aura of being a manager and being a leader of men. David believes in his ability. Most people in baseball do. I had one general manager ask me at the GM meetings last week in Scottsdale, he wanted a thumbnail profile, what Ross was like handling people, and looking forward to having a conversation with him. So, I mean, I don't see how that could benefit David Ross by being a bench coach, sitting there and maybe being the next manager of the Yankees. It's like, I don't know, really, is the Yankee job a good job anymore? I don't really think so.
Bruce, you've been covering, like you said, a lot of these press conferences, a lot of these managerial changes. How surprised were you by this move? And you were at the GM meetings. I mean, that had to have been just all the talk in Scottsdale.
Well, everybody was shocked by it, and there was only, 5 people that knew about it. There was only Barry Meister, the agent for Counsell, Jed Hoyer, Carter Hawkins, and Tom Ricketts. That was it. That was kept between the 5. I'm sure Crane Kenny was clued in at some point by Tom, but there was no way it got out. I mean, they had asked for permission, and 5 days later, he was the manager of the Cubs. Conversations at Jed Hoyer's house. I didn't know if Jed's wife served lunch or not, or how whether they had it catered, or maybe by Unos or Duets. I don't know what happened, but the point is that for something that felt so strange, I think today was a kind of a normal baseball day and a hiring of a manager, and Cub fans getting an idea of the fact that this guy is going to be a terrific manager for them, a great baseball man for them, but subject to the same thing Ross was subject to, and that is what's Hoyer going to do in the offseason to make this team better?
Right. Well, that's the $1 million question, right, Bruce? What's next? What's the shopping list look like? We all know the obvious names. We'll get to that in a minute, but real quick, Barry, you just mentioned Barry Meister, his longtime agent, longtime guy, local guy here around town that I'm sure you've had many conversations with. You had a great interview with him on your 10-year anniversary show this past Saturday. Congratulations on that. Again, you and I shared a quick text about that. But when the managers come to town and the stars of baseball come to Chicago, you always get your microphone in there. You always make a point, whether it's something that ends up on the air or just a personal relationship. So what kind of dealings over the time that Craig Counsell has been the skipper in Milwaukee, what were your impressions of him then?
Well, the first question to him at the press conference was from me about him being a winner. And that's all I've ever thought of when I thought of Counsell. I always thought, wow, winning a World Series with the Florida Marlins, then the Florida Marlins, then a few years later, winning a World Series with the Arizona Diamondbacks, a gritty guy that didn't have all the talent in the world, but got every ounce out of it, knew how to beat you. All he did was go up there, and he didn't hit 300. He didn't hit home runs. All he did was go up there and beat you. And that's the same way he's been in his career as a front office guy and then a manager. I watched him in numerous spring trainings sitting there with the general manager of the Brewers and the assistant general manager before he became the manager, and just sitting there with them and learning the trade, going out and watching spring training games, scouting on his own, dealing with the metrics departments. This is a really bright guy. And that's not to take anything away from David Ross, who is just as much a great baseball guy. But this guy is something different. Anytime that the Brewers came to town, I would say, oh, yeah, the Cubs have to beat Counsell. I didn't say they'd have to beat the Pirates or the Cardinals, but when the Brewers came to town, I said, oh, man, this is going to be tough today. They have to beat Craig Counsell. And I think, to me, in my own mind and seeing him, I always felt that he was right at the forefront of, man, you're going to have to run me over, then you're going to have to back over me, and then you're going to have to run me over again, beat me. And I think if you listen to Jed Hoyer and his impressions of how the Cubs had to work so hard in 2017 to beat a Brewer team that was clearly inferior talent-wise, just to get there again, told you volumes about why he is the manager of the Cubs today.
Now, Bruce, he did mention, like you said, that he has some homework to do still, and he's taking his time and kind of being methodical about it. But what do you think this means for the coaching staff? I remember when Joe Madden was hired by the Cubs, that infrastructure was in place, and I think they were pretty happy with it. Obviously you have Tommy Hotovy in there. They just were talking about John Maley coming back. What of the coaching staff right now, do you think that Counsell has some other guys in mind, or do you think he really is kind of going to take his time and see what he has?
I think he's very open-minded about the whole thing. He admitted that he had so much work to do that he wasn't going to just automatically hire his friends or hire people that he knew. He wanted to get to know Tommy Hotovy. He wanted to get to know the hitting people. He wanted to understand what the labs were all about. I think this is a very smart, methodical guy that really wants to take his time to figure out what's going on. And again, he didn't even think about Chicago Cubs until a week ago, and now he's the manager for the next 5 years. So I like the idea that he's going to take his time. And it's not a comfortable situation for the Cubs coaches, but I think some of them are going to be okay. I think they'll stay in the organization, even if they're not big league coaches. And I'm pretty sure that Counsell wants to have in-depth meetings with these guys who are under contract and kind of get what it's all about, the way the Cubs do things, not the way the Brewers did things or he's done things in the past. He's going to want to know and understand how they coach, what is the background of the labs that they deal with, the metrics people. I mean, there's an awful lot for him to do, and I think he's going to get right to it.
Yeah, he seems very enthusiastic, said a lot of great things at the press conference, definitely won this Cub fan over. I wasn't thrilled about it at first. Two parts, really liked and respect David Ross. And then, of course, as a fan, I don't like the Brewers. I don't like anything about the Brewers. So I didn't want that around my Cubs. But he really, I thought, did a terrific day today. Bruce, let's talk about future Cubs, future potential Cubs. Earlier today on The Score, Jed Hoyer with Parkins and Spiegel, he was talking about the chances of Ohtani becoming a Cub originally had the DH been around on the National League side at that point. Of course, it wasn't. Of course, now it is. Bruce, two-part question. Number one, do you think the Cubs have a legitimate shot at Ohtani? And part two, do you think Ohtani pitches again, or is he really just a hitter moving forward?
Yeah, I can't answer part two, and I don't think anybody in the world can answer that because this is the second elbow surgery for Ohtani in 4 years. So that's not a good sign. If you're smart, you're saying we're signing Ohtani, the hitter, the dominant, one of the dominant hitters in baseball. He'll be named American League MVP this week. Okay, he's that dominant, and you say, okay, he's our DH. We're going to pay him X amount for that. We're going to pay X amount for him as a pitcher if he comes back the following year. It'll be structured in the contract. So the contract might go anywhere from $400 to $500 million, depending on if he pitches again. But, let's deal with the reality. The Cubs will and do have the resources to sign Ohtani. They will present a great package for him. He will be wined and dined, and he will, like Chicago, I hope they get him here this week while it's still 55 degrees. But nonetheless, the real important question is, where does Ohtani want to play? Because I think he can play anywhere. Any team in Major League Baseball can rationalize having Ohtani on the team. They'll get their money back one way or the other.
Right.
Fans, merchandising, television, whatever it is. He's going to be doing more interviewing than the Cubs will be doing. The question is, does he want to be in Los Angeles or San Francisco, which is 4 hours or 5 hours closer to his home in Japan, not only for him, but for his family and friends that want to come and visit? Is that essential for him? Does he want to play in the nicer weather? If it was Crawly or you, Dustin, or me, we'd say, well, Dodgers, Cubs, I'll take the Dodgers. If you're not a Cub fan, you'd say, wow, what a great franchise. They've been to the playoffs 10 years in a row. They have tremendous amount of resources. The president and general manager seems to be one of the smartest people in baseball. Why not the Dodgers? But if there is a difference in what he's looking for, and he's looking for a different challenge, I don't see why the Chicago Cubs wouldn't be a favorite after that. Again, none of us know what he's thinking. None of us know where he wants to go. But I don't think anybody really thought it was going to be the Angels last time. I don't think they were the number one pick of all the pundits and all the experts who were trying to find a place where Ohtani was going to go.
Well, Bruce, speaking of Japanese pitchers, Jed's been over to Japan to look at some other pitchers. With Stroman opting out, do you see the Cubs making a run at righty Yoshinobu Yamamoto or lefty Shota Imanaga?
Yeah, I think so. And again, Yamamoto is going to cost you 30 times 7, okay? So it's a $200 million contract. It's a big contract for a guy that's never pitched in the United States before. It's kind of like the Darvish Derby way back when Texas got him to sign with them. Yeah, I think they will. But again, let's be if it's going to cost $500 million for Ohtani, do they have the other $200 million to put forth? In other words, $65 to $70 million a year for the next 5 to 10 years off of their payroll for two players. Okay, is that the right way to go? Okay, is it a smarter way to go to get Bellinger and to trade for either Soto or Alonso? Is that a smarter way to go in this offseason? There's a lot of things that they can do now. And I think the one underrated area of the Cubs that people aren't thinking much about is they have players in the minor leagues that other teams want. Okay. So you are going to be able to make trades now that we weren't able to make even when they were winning championships. They don't have players necessarily at the major league level to trade. And I'll challenge you guys to find me somebody that they can trade off of that roster right now, because I don't see any that are expendable for them at this point in time. But they do have minor leaguers that would be interesting to other people. Would you trade a Pete Crow Armstrong? Would you trade a Cassie? Would you trade some of these elite young players that haven't made it yet to the major leagues for an opportunity for Alonso or Soto? So deciding how to spend the money and, whether you bring back Bellinger and a Japanese pitcher and then make trades. I would honestly, if I was the general manager or the president, I would go that direction. It's not that I don't think Ohtani is a dominant player, but he's a DH. You still have to fill out 8 spots on your team. You still have to fill out that pitching staff. You still need 2 to 3 bullpen guys. I would rather see them spend the money throughout the roster than on 2 players coming back this year.
Yeah, Bruce, I'm with you on that. I'd like to see $600 million spread out maybe against 4 or 5 names for sure. So a couple of names that we didn't hear you talk about there that I'd like to get your opinion on. You did bring up Juan Soto, and one of the rumors out there was, I think reported by you first, that Christopher Morel might be a guy that they would want back. The Cubs have been saying that they're working him out exclusively at first base. They've been trying to figure out where would you play Christopher Morel on a daily basis. Another guy that we saw at first base for a little bit, it didn't work out. There was a lot of buzz, is Matt Mervis, and you did not mention his name when you were talking about some of the more elite guys down on the farm. So, number one, how many teams want Christopher Morel? And then number two, have they is Matt Mervis down a peg or two?
Yeah, let's start with Mervis. He's definitely down, and that is there's a question about his bat speed. So he's a one-tool player. He has power and a lot of it. Will he hit for power and not strike out 200 times in the major leagues? That's the question. Not great feet, not a great defender. He was definitely hard on himself while he was here. So you don't question the makeup, you question his belief in himself and where he can go. So with those things in mind, I don't think that there's a high priority on him being the first baseman this year. So looking at him, I would just not say, that he's in their picture. Would they trade him? Probably. And the other question was?
As far as what they're doing with Christopher Morel, playing him a bunch at first base, and is he a guy? You said nobody on the current roster would be. He's probably the most tradable guy on the current roster that they could part with because they don't have a real position for him.
So if David Ross and the coaching staff would be held to a failure in 2023, it would be the non-development of Morel at a position. I understood it. Ross didn't want to lose games because every time he put him out there, he made an error. Yep. And he didn't look like he belonged out there. You guys watch all the games. Yep. You saw him. He looked uncomfortable every position they put him at. To me, it was like, dude, you're our third baseman. You are going to be working out there every day. We don't care how many balls bounce off your chest or hit you in the shoulder. you are going to be our guy. Because there was no, look, Madrigal was a nice story, and, certainly, there are other things to look at there, but there was a great opening at third base that they refused to put him at because Ross didn't want to lose games. And I'm with David 100%. You don't want to have a good team out there and have one position losing games for you. But I watched batting practice, 80 times at Wrigley Field, and he worked out all over the place. He wasn't working at one position. And I think the exclusivity of him at one position is just going to make him a more relaxed player and most likely a dominant power hitter in the game.
Now, Bruce, we've been hearing more and more buzz about Rhys Hoskins, and the Cubs just brought John Maley back into the coaching fold. We don't know what's going to happen now with Counsell and as the skipper. But do you think the Cubs might try another pillow contract with Rhys Hoskins like they did with Cody Bellinger?
Yeah, I mean, look, even at the GM meetings last week, Scott Boras brought up a pillow contract for him because he missed a whole year. Okay. And he's coming back, and at age 30, 31, there's some question marks. So they're not going to get the long-term contract for him that they want. I think a 1-year deal with an option for the team might be good. But right now, the Cubs don't really know, what they're going to be doing as far as, are they bringing back Bellinger, and would that be a position that they would consider keeping him at if Armstrong comes along in spring training and shows he can hit major league pitching, So you have a lot of different options. Where you don't have options in left, and you don't have options in right, okay? You have two good players. One was a Gold Glover. The other was a surprisingly dominant hitter in Suzuki the last 2 months of the season, one of the better stories in baseball. A finalist for a Silver Slugger. So they both have no trades. One for 3 years. I think they're both, one for 2 years, the other 3. So you have them there. You're not trading them. Nothing to trade in center. Nothing to trade at shortstop and second base. So, and catcher, you're bringing back a 37-year-old catcher, and you're hoping Amaya can throw this year because he couldn't throw it all last year. Yeah. So there's a lot of places that you have to fill right there. As much as I love Patrick Wisdom and that story, to me, it's, they're probably going to non-tender Patrick Wisdom. That's my guess.
All right, Bruce, we're going to ask you for one more guess before we let you go. Third base, Candelario, somebody that we're not thinking of. I mean, any chance Nick Madrigal, who played a much better third base than I ever thought possible, but do you think he's in the mix? He kind of feels like a Craig Counsell guy.
Yeah, I don't have a feel for that. They obviously need one out there. I don't believe it's going to be Candelario. They haven't talked to his agent since the last day of the season. The agent was not thrilled about that, but he doesn't feel that his player is being taken seriously by the Cubs. I like Candelario. I thought he brought a tremendous amount of energy and a resurgence to the team when he came there. After he hurt his back, he wasn't really a non-factor for them. He's not a great defender. He's a good defender at third. He's not a good defender at first. You could bring him back on a couple-year contract, but I think they're moving forward without him. I don't have a feel for who's going to be playing there, but again, with their resources, they might have an idea that I don't have right now for them.
Bruce, just a couple things real quick before you leave. Number one, I wanted to thank you for coming out to the Joe Madden event at Club 400. It was great seeing you being a part of the Club 400 family, and everyone was thrilled, and you were so nice in answering people's questions. And the other thing, as somebody that doesn't care about college football or football in general, inside the clubhouse has been just a lifeline for me over the off season. And it's every Saturday morning from 9 to 11 on the Score, 670 The Score. And like I said, it's just such a great show. And thank you for keeping baseball at the forefront, even when it's not happening.
Well, I appreciate that. And I get that from a lot of people. A lot of people can't stand me, okay? But they love the idea that baseball is being talked about every Saturday on both the north and the south side, okay? And to me, it's a great pleasure because I'm a fan just like everybody else is, and I want to be talking baseball for those 2 hours. And it's great that people have a place to go because it's so bear-oriented in the fall and the winter. Even when the team is awful and people shouldn't really be paying attention to it, it still takes time away. So my friend Jeff Vukovic and I, we always have a fun time where as soon as the World Series ends, he calls me and he says, "Worst day of the year." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "But I'm looking forward to the end of the Super Bowl. That's the first day of the baseball season. We can start feeling good about spring training and baseball on both sides of town one more time."
Bruce, thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you soon on the Mully and Haw show, and always a pleasure and just a great privilege for Crawly and I for you to give us 15 minutes right now.
Well, since you told me I was going to get paid, I felt really good about doing it. So thanks, guys.
Max and Benny's on me.
It was a fun time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Bruce. You are listening to Season 2, 87. Craig Counsell introduced at a press conference of the Fly the W670 podcast. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to the Fly the W podcast. All right, Crawly. Obviously, the big news of the day is Craig Counsell being introduced as the 56th skipper. Yes, I said skipper of our Chicago Cubs. We just had a great interview with Bruce Levine. Now let's get into some of the Cubs news and notes. Not as big as Craig Counsell, but still very important.
No. But MLB gave out their Silver Sluggers Award since we last recorded. The Silver Slugger Awards, which are voted on by MLB managers and coaches, are given to the top offensive player at each position in each league. And although the Cubs had 3 players that were nominated for the Silver Slugger, Cody Bellinger, Dansby Swanson, and Seiya Suzuki, we only had one winner, Cody Bellinger. There he is. Look at this guy. Cody Bellinger, just another piece of hardware to add to the trophy case. What a season he had. And, at this point, Bellinger is going to win it in the utility category since he played both center and first. So, Dustin, this was, like I said, I don't get why he wasn't nominated in the same category for the Gold Glove. I thought he should have won that in the utility category. But again, just another thing that Scott Boras can just show another team. And
Cha-ching.
Yep, that money keeps going up. Keeps going up.
The price tag just went. Did Crawly a worked-in bonus for that one like he did for the Comeback Player of the Year award?
I didn't see any bonus. But those bonuses do. The most famous is the Dawson Blank contract. He got the bonus. There was a bonus in that one for winning the MVP. So it's not uncommon, but it's just like the Cubs just hit the lottery scratch off on that one. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. There's also some news here on David Ross.
Yeah. David Ross was offered the Yankees bench coach job, but he turned him down. When the Mets realized they weren't getting Craig Counsell, they signed Yankees bench coach Carlos Mendoza to be the new skipper of the Metropolitans. I said skipper too. Now, Yankees manager Aaron Boone worked with Ross at ESPN when they were both doing the baseball for the 4-letter network. But Ross told them that he would prefer to get a manager's job. So he's getting paid, Dustin, for 2024 no matter what, right?
Right.
So he can kind of do what he wants here. He spent time with the family. He's getting paid, but the Astros have promoted their bench coach, Joe Espada, to manager. Funny thing, Dustin, is back in the day, that's who I wanted the Cubs to replace Madden with, was Joe Espada. And this was right after the trash can incidents and everything came out there. And so nobody wanted
him. That ruined him with everybody for a while. Yeah.
Right. But hey, you know what? He worked his good graces back in, and let's see what happens. But there's now 2 open jobs. If Ross is serious about this, the Padres, and wait for it, Dustin, the Brewers job is still open. So,
gosh, I would love that. I would absolutely love that. And David Ross deserves a second chance. I don't know, though, if it's smart for him to sit out next year. I understand he's getting paid, but just being out 1 year kind of out of sight, out of mind. I don't know that I would advise David Ross, who I know has been grinding at the game of baseball for a long, long time, that it would be wise for him to take off. I mean, go work for Fox, go work for Four Letter Network, go work for Turner, work at MLB Network, but do not sit on the sidelines, take the kiddos fishing into Disneyland and stuff. Like, you got to keep your nose in the game a little bit. Doesn't mean he's going to forget everything. I just mean out of sight, out of mind might not be the best thing for David Ross.
And to me, the thing that I always felt that Ross lacked was experience. This is a chance to get a different type of experience and get some more knowledge, learn from other people in a coaching staff.
Now, maybe the job will still be open if the Padres job doesn't go through, but I haven't seen much about him getting interviewed. I've seen a whole bunch of other people getting interviewed. Haven't seen a whole lot of traction that David Ross has officially interviewed with the Padres, and we haven't heard a thing other than Counsell's former bench coach, Pat Murphy, is the only name I've heard in Milwaukee so far.
I haven't heard of anyone else interviewing. I've heard things kicked around like Ricky Weeks and a couple other names, but no one that's actually interviewed.
Yeah, so I guess maybe if those jobs don't turn into David Ross's jobs, maybe he can circle back. I don't know how big of a rush the Yankees are to fill that position. Something you keep your eyes closely on, and I really appreciate it, hopefully the listeners do as well, is things like the Arizona Fall League.
Yeah, it came to an end Saturday night when the surprise Saguaros beat the Peoria Javelinas 6-5 to win the Fall League title. After the games are over, then they start to announce all the awards, and Cubs prospect James Triantos was named the Arizona Fall League Offensive Player of the Year. Triantos has been on this podcast as a guest before, but what an honor and what a season he had. He led the Fall League in triples with 5. He ranked second in slugging at .679, OPS 1.144, hits 35, and total bases 57, and he placed third on on-base percentage at .495. So Triantos is someone, and we talked to him. I've talked to him with Jim Callis. I've talked to him with Rich Biesterfeld. It's just a question. The kid can hit. It's just, where are we going to find a position for him? So just kind of someone to keep your eye on. And I think him and Kevin Alcantara did a great job representing the Cubs in the Arizona Fall League.
A name that a lot of our listeners probably don't know, and a name that you and I both know, somebody that we've both dealt with quite a bit. Surprise announcement from Jed Hoyer before the press conference really got underway, Crawly.
Yeah, he, announced that Jason Carr, who's the director of media relations, is leaving the organization after 18 years. Like you said, Dustin, just such a fantastic guy, always helpful with everything. And it's hard when the good ones go, especially, someone like me and you that have both been around the team for so long, is that, some of the old school guys are still there. It's kind of like a bridge to the past, and it's hard when a guy like that is going to leave. So.
Yeah, we wish Jason all the best. That's got to be a grind, that job. You're there before the players are there. You're there after the players. You go on a lot of the road trips. You got to do a lot of things that don't necessarily go notice to the average fan, but they do go to us that cover the team and things like that. You've got a couple of big dates coming up that you want to remind everybody about.
Yeah, this is really important. 2 important dates, and it happens tomorrow. So you got to keep this in mind before our next podcast happens. On November 14th, which is tomorrow, the players who received a qualifying offer from their clubs must accept or decline the offer. Now, remember, the qualifying offer, for example, with Cody Bellinger is 1 year, $20 million. But we know he's going
I hope he takes it.
We know he's going to turn it down, but the Cubs will get a compensatory draft pick, but it becomes official tomorrow. And I don't see too many players at all taking the offer as the qualifying offer. So that'll give us a really good idea by trade deadline, who is going to be available as far as free agents.
Right. We'll have a better picture, right? We'll have a better overall official picture.
Right. Official picture. And so the second deadline for tomorrow is that the Cubs must add players to the 40-man roster to protect them from next month's Rule 5 draft. Now, this is the downside of having a great farm system, is that you just can't keep them all. And that's why this draft was put into place, so that teams with great farm systems didn't keep stacking talent, but maybe these players would never have a chance to play. So come next month, and we'll talk more about it with the Rule 5 draft. If your player is not on your 40-man roster, another team can pick them and put them on their team. The only condition is they have to stay on the 26-man roster for the entire season.
Oh.
You cannot put them in the minors, and you can only put them on the IL, I believe, 90 days. So just something to keep in mind because of so many good players that the Cubs have. You just want to, you just get scared you're going to lose somebody good and somebody's going to pick them off. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we will see what happens. Really, really interesting times to be a Cub fan. This is definitely the place, Crawly, for the fans to come. We're going to keep you updated on everything that happens. If there is an emergency, breaking news, trust me, Crawly and I will get right behind these mics and fill you in. So that's a wrap of Season 2, Episode 87, Craig Counsell introductory press conference. Don't forget to listen, download, review, and subscribe to that Fly the W podcast. Follow us on the socials. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Of course, you can email the show, flythew670@gmail.com. And you can watch us on the YouTube by subscribing to the 670 The Score YouTube channel. Crawly, have a great week, and we will talk soon.
I don't know, man. I'm just telling you, leave those 5-star reviews, and I hope everybody was as pumped up as I was by that day Craig Counsell press conference. Go Cubs! Hey guys, it's Crawly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Go Cubs!